Hey guys, it's History Behind the Warrior and welcome back to another Mortal Kombat video. Now in today's History of Breakdown and Analysis, I'll be talking about none other than a beloved fan favourite in the series, the Saurian Reptile. Now in order for us to really talk about Reptile properly, not only do we have to talk about his race, but we have to go to the dawn of time and explain the events that transpired that led to the downfall of Zaterra, as it is in fact a key important part of Reptile's history, as Zaterra is a driving force for a lot of this character's motivation. So with this being said, let's talk about the history of Reptile. Now as mentioned, let's go back to the very dawn of time, the birth of the Saurians. Now this of course came to be after the Elder Gods defeated the One Being and separated his physical being, later turning into the realms as we know it. And these different realms over the course of time would of course bring forth life, with one of the races of course being Zaterrans, or in this case Saurian, as the Saurians don't actually derive from Zaterra. That is something we will get to in a bit. Now not much is actually really known about the Saurians race. We just know that they did have a system with a matriarch at the very head of their race, and we also know that for the most part they were primitive. Mind you, they weren't stupid by any intents and purposes, but the realms were still coming into being and the Saurians were still trying to find their place in the universe. So they would start building a home and society in Earthrealm, but this would all quickly fall into disarray. You see, shortly after life started to flourish in the realms, an elder god by the name of Shinnok was disgusted by the offspring that the One Being had created, and thus wished to exterminate them. Despite his fellow elder gods being against this, he would proceed with his attack, first starting off in Earthrealm. Now unfortunately for the Saurians, their home was caught in the middle of this conflict, and by the end of the battle, when Shinnok was defeated, they were left without a home. The ground was barren, and thus because of this they were forced to move on, to find new land, and hopefully build a new home. And this is where they came across Zaterra, a realm that was in fact absent of life at the time, and it seemed perfect for the Saurians. They started to rebuild their society, but once again this would all fall apart. You see, when they had left Earthrealm, they would catch the attention of Outworld's Emperor, Shao Kahn. Seeing how they were weak and on the back foot, the Outworld Emperor would spring an invasion on Zaterra, killing the Queen, and leave only a few Saurians alive, forcing them into his service as he merged Zaterra with Outworld. So Reptile is in fact one of the few remaining Saurians in the series, and the only Saurian to become a commander in Shao Kahn's army. Now as you would imagine, all the way up to the first Mortal Kombat tournament, Reptile has a rather shaky relationship with Shao Kahn, naturally being disgusted what the Emperor has done, but it cannot be denied that some sort of relationship is forming. You see, due to Reptile being severed from the matriarch, his mental psyche does start to deteriorate, something which we will physically see in later installments. And due to having some kind of governing figure, Reptile slowly but surely starts to idolize Shao Kahn. The Emperor begins to blackmail Reptile, using his own people against him. Now although not playable, Reptile is present in the very first Mortal Kombat game. Being given the mission of protecting Shang Tsung by the Emperor, he remains invisible for the entirety of the tournament, and is, fun fact, a secret character you can play against in the very first game. But outside of this, Reptile doesn't really play a role in Mortal Kombat 1. He is however active in its sequel, Mortal Kombat 2. After Shang Tsung's defeat in the first tournament, the Emperor Shao Kahn has grown frustrated with Earthrealm constantly eluding his grasp, and thus makes a deal with the Earthrealmers to hold a tournament in Outworld, with their reward being, if they are victorious, that he will not pursue Earthrealm. And of course, as we all do know, this is an offer they would accept, knowing that they could get the Emperor off their back. Now as the second tournament is underway, Shao blackmails the Saurian, knowing that Reptile wants the best for his people. Shao told Reptile if they didn't succeed in this tournament, then he would force all of his Saurian servants into slavery. So all of their lives were very much so dependent on Reptile succeeding in this tournament. But despite the home field advantage, the Emperor was defeated by the Shaolin monk Liu Kang, meaning that the Saurians were now slaves. Although this point isn't elaborated on at the end of MK2-3, because in Mortal Kombat 3, when Shao Kahn begins his mass invasion of Earthrealm, he approaches Reptile once again, promising him that he would revive the Saurian race if they do succeed this time. Now during the events of the third game is where Shao's influence really starts invading Reptile's mind. Although he wants the best for his race, he has now become a devoted follower of Shao Kahn. Khan, and Phos follows his orders during the mass invasion of Earthrealm. At one point in time, he's even approached by another Saurian, that being Chameleon, who ultimately tries her best to sway him from Shao's side, but he's beyond gone, and Reptile is nothing more than simply a servant of Shao Kahn. Now, as Earthrealm burns, Reptile was given the mission alongside Jade to track down Shao Kahn's foster daughter and Edenian princess Kitana, as she betrayed them in the second tournament, siding with Earthrealm and assisting them. So the pair are given an assassination mission, but as soon as they do find a princess, Jade would turn on Reptile, defeating him and taking him into Edenian custody. So by the end of Mortal Kombat 3, when Shao Kahn is defeated once again by Liu Kang, Reptile doesn't return back to Outworld. He's instead taken to Edenia, as the realm was freed from Shao Kahn's grasp upon his defeat, and he's tried for his crimes, being a servant of Shao Kahn and participating in many attacks across the realms. His punishment would be that he was banished to the Netherrealm for all eternity. So this brings us on to our next game, Mortal Kombat 4. In the fourth installment of the series, Reptile would find a new master in the fallen elder god Shinnok. As you see behind the scenes, while Shao Kahn was locked in battle with Earthrealm, the fallen elder god had planned a full-scale invasion, so he could destroy the heavens and all that existed. Now, although it did seem like Reptile was well aware of what Shinnok had done to his people, he wanted to side with Shinnok in the hopes that if they were successful, then he'd be able to convince him to revive the Saurians. But much like on every other previous attempt, this was simply just a dream, because although Shinnok's attack was successful up to a certain extent, when the elder god went toe-to-toe with Liu Kang, he would be defeated and was once again incarcerated to the Netherrealm, a place where he was now damned to for an eternity. Now, upon losing another master, with the realm in tatters, Reptile would use this opportunity to escape the Netherrealm and return back to Shao's side. So he does return in the next installment, Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. Now, a significant amount of time passes between 4 and Deadly Alliance, and this is where things get rather interesting for Reptile as a character. You see, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, Reptile was mentally starting to fall apart, requiring someone to basically hold his hand to do anything, and in the 3D era of games is where this is somewhat taken to another level. Although he was mentally regressing, Reptile still retained a somewhat human form for the very early games in the series. It's in Deadly Alliance, but Reptile really starts living up to his name, becoming far more Saurian in appearance, with a full-blown tail, reptilian scales all over his body, and an elongated mouth. And the reason as to why this was happening is apparently due to how long he's been separated from the matriarch. When a Saurian is separated from their matriarch and they lose that authority figure in their life, they first start mentally regressing, no longer having a somewhat true master, and their true Saurian side starts coming through, as there's no one there to keep him in check. Now, between the 4th installment and Deadly Alliance, Outworld has in fact been locked in battle with Edenia, and the two sides are warring against each other, so it is chaos on both sides, and Outworld's forces have been severely weakened. So when things look bad, Reptile is given the mission of tracking down Shang Tsung, as Shao needs assistance from the sorcerer. But just before entering his lair, he learns of a secret alliance formed by Shang Tsung and Quan Chi, with a plan that involves killing the Emperor, as well as the Shaolin monk Liu Kang. Terrified of what may ensue if this happens, Reptile travels back to Outworld as quick as he can, but on his journey is distracted by the vampire Zaterra, as she has something of interest to him, that being a Saurian dagger known as the Kyohashi Blade, an ancient artifact of Saurian culture that could be used as a catalyst to bring his people back. And although at first he does consider the idea, he declines Zaterra's offer, wishing to first and foremost save his master. But upon entering the throne room, he realizes that he is too late. The Emperor has been killed, and once again he is absent of a master. So as you would imagine, this is where Zaterra does step in, promising Reptile that together they will bring back Zaterra to its former glory. But of course, this is all just a lie. What Zaterra really wanted was to bring back her home Vaeternus, a realm that, much like Reptile, was conquered and merged by Shao Kahn with Outworld. So she does have a plan in mind that will allow her to sever Vaeternus from Outworld. Now, after some manipulation on her part between Cyrax and Reptile, she's able to bring them to the Lava Shrine and get her the portal stone she needs in order to free Vaeternus from Outworld. Upon doing so, Reptile is left alone in this Lava Shrine with what seems to be a mysterious dragon egg. Sadly for the Saurian, his curiosity does get the better of him, and when he approaches the egg, it cracks open and strikes him with a beam of light. The mysterious dragon egg here, in fact, housed the dormant soul of the Dragon King Onaga, who had in fact been plotting his return for decades. And upon Reptile entering the lava chamber, Onaga saw him as a suitable host, and Phos merged with him, turning Reptile into the Dragon King Onaga. Mortal Kombat Deception. Now Reptile himself isn't really present in Mortal Kombat Deception, however his infused counterpart, Onaga, is the main big antagonist of this installment, and after merging with Reptile and using Shigenko to gather all of the Kami Dogus, it looks like the Dragon King has won. But with the combined efforts of Shigenko, Liu Kang, Ermac and Nightwolf, they are able to not only defeat Onaga, but exorcise Reptile from his body, meaning that the Saurian is now free of the Dragon King's influence. And from here he does flee to Outworld. So it brings us to our final installment in the original timeline, Mortal Kombat Armageddon. Now Reptile in Armageddon doesn't actually play that big of a role, making a very brief appearance in the conquest mode of that game. You see, whilst Haven is exploring the realms, trying to recover relics left over by his father Argus, he comes across the Saurian in the Red Dragon headquarters, as he was interested to see the experiments the Red Dragons were working on. You see, Dagon, the leader of the Red Dragons, would take his own dragon Karo and splice its DNA with humans, creating these very strange reptilian-human hybrids, something which understandably did interest Reptile, as it is very clear that he's still interested in reviving his race. But upon seeing the monsters that Dagon had created, it seems that once he entered the facility, he immediately lost all interest. This however did not stop him from coming into conflict with Taven, and the two would fight, with the Edenian demigod being victorious. Now Reptile's last and final appearance in the original timeline is during the Battle of Armageddon, where he joins the forces of darkness to battle the forces of light, and does perish alongside everyone else. So this brings us up to our reboot, Mortal Kombat 9. Now at the very start of the game, the universe is reset by Raiden, sending a message to his past self in order to prevent the events of Armageddon unfolding. So Mortal Kombat 9 begins at the very first tournament in the series. However, there has been some slight tweaks and alterations, as in this reboot, there are many characters that are present in the first tournament that weren't there in the original game, with Reptile playing more of an active role in this tournament. Now what's quite interesting about Reptile in this tournament is that there are in fact some events in the MKX comic book series that does intertwine with the character. As you see, the Saurian was sent to the first tournament by Shao Kahn, as the Emperor had his doubts about the Sorcerer's true intentions, and thus he was given the mission to spy on the Sorcerer. Now although he was supposed to have a rather covert mission, he did get involved in the tournament, losing in its very first match against the very arrogant actor Johnny Cage. So after his loss in the tournament, he was eliminated, and as we all do know, Shang Tsung is defeated in the very first tournament, nearly being executed after this until the Outworld tournament begins. But the big question is, how does this affect Reptile? Well, after his loss at the hands of Johnny Cage, the Emperor loses all faith in the Saurian, even ordering one of his generals, Kotal, to assassinate Reptile in his sleep. But the Saurian does survive to the morning, where he's ordered to Shao Kahn's throne room and learns that his new commander will in fact be Kotal, as the Oztec saw potential in Reptile and didn't wish to kill him, instead wanting to spare his life and give him the opportunity to become something more than what Shao Kahn had offered him. Now under Kotal's orders, Reptile travels out to the Living Forest with Shang Tsung, as they're currently in the process of making a deal with the Black Dragon. But it's here where they are confronted by the Lin Kuei ninja Smoke, as Smoke and the younger Sub-Zero were currently in the process of tracking down Scorpion, so anyone who was present at the first tournament may possibly have information of his location. So the Black Dragon leader, as well as Shang Tsung and Reptile, would battle him, but Smoke's skill proved to be far too much for them, as he did defeat them, but with some interference from the Cyber Lin Kuei, Shang Tsung and Reptile were able to slither away. Now this isn't the last time we do see Reptile in the second tournament, as he does appear in Sub-Zero's chapter, where Kuai Lang is ordering Shao Kahn to summon Scorpion. Of course, unimpressed, he would summon Reptile to battle him, but the Cryomancer's skill exceeds Shao Kahn's expectation, and Reptile is once again defeated. Now after these events, much like the original timeline, Shao Kahn would be defeated, and Outworld would begin its invasion of Earthrealm, with Reptile being very much so active and present during this invasion, killing many of Earthrealm's forces, and even going after the likes of Cabal and Stryker. The battle was fierce, as he is able to incapacitate Cabal, but when confronted by Stryker, it seems like Reptile is bitten off more than he can chew, and he is defeated. Now this sadly is the last time we do see him in Mortal Kombat 9, but at the very end of the game, Shao Kahn is defeated and taken to the heavens by the Elder Gods for punishment, meaning that the Khan throne in Outworld is now open, a seat that Mileena initially fills, until Kotal steps in. Displeased with her ruthless nature, Reptile sides with Kotal, and after recruiting some allies, they are able to dethrone her, so Kotal is able to ascend to the title of Khan, whilst Mileena is driven to the outskirts of the realm. So Outworld is now under new leadership, with Kotal controlling what goes on in the realm, so things at this point in time look rather good for Outworld. But this is where disaster would strike. Although not initially involved, the fallen elder god Shinnok would spring an attack on Earthrealm, wanting to corrupt the Jinsei, and Kotal and his forces, wanting to build a somewhat better relationship with Earthrealm, would assist them in this ongoing battle. Now, as expected, Shinnok would be defeated, and the relationship between Earthrealm and Outworld wouldn't be so much mended, but a relationship would start to form there, with a little bit of trust on both sides. But the chaos is far from over, as we are dawning onto the Mortal Kombat X comic book series. Now, Reptile during the comic book run doesn't really do anything substantial. He's one of Kotal's generals, and does fight back against Mileena's forces. At one point during the comics, where Kotal's father is killed, he follows Kotal into battle to defeat Mileena, something which they are somewhat successful in, as Mileena's forced to retreat from Outworld, as her general, Goro, is defeated and disarmed by Kotal. Now, despite being somewhat victorious, the victory is short-lived, as they would be attacked by the special forces, who had believed that they had kidnapped Cassie Cage and Jackie Briggs. Although at first things are rather hostile, after Johnny Cage is able to cool down the situation, they learn that one of their own, Erron Black, has in fact betrayed them, taking part in the kidnapping of the two girls with the Black Dragons. Now, wanting answers, they would travel to the Kwarteng jungle, where they would find a bloody and beaten Erron Black, learning from him that they were ambushed by the Red Dragon, and the two girls were no longer in their care. But before they're able to pursue the Red Dragons, Outworld would be attacked. You see Goro's father, Gorbak, learn of Kotal dishonoring his son, cutting off his arms and sending him home. Now, this in Shokan culture is considered the ultimate form of disrespect, and thus Gorbak understandably took this to heart and went after Kotal, sending his Shokan army to destroy him. And the battle was bloody, with Reptile fighting and killing many in his way, but does suffer some fatal wounds during this onslaught. Fortunately for him, he would be rescued by Devourer and Kotal was able to successfully kill Gorbak before making an alliance with the Shokan, explaining how this was all a form of manipulation. Now, with this battle out the way, Reptile, Kotal and the special forces can finally pursue what exactly has happened to Cassie Cage and Jackie. They quickly learn that the two are apparently being kept on Shang Tsung's island, as some part of ritual or larger plan. You see, behind the scenes, one of Mileena's generals, Reiko, had been plotting with the Chaos Cleric Havoc, wanting to obtain the power of a blood god, so he requires powerful fighters in order to do so, which is why he captured the girls, in order to lure the special forces and Kotal in, as he required them to be part of his ritual. Now, Reptile doesn't in fact participate in the initial invasion, remaining in Outworld healing his wounds, but when he receives word from an injured Devourer of Kotal's defeat, and this plan in fact all being orchestrated by Havoc, Reptile and his allies arrive at Shang Tsung's island and do battle with the Chaos Cleric and his blood-coded slaves. This includes the likes of Kotal himself. But during this fight, Reptile does go toe-to-toe with Mileena. Now, the Outworlders are holding their ground, but it seems like the influence from the Chaos Cleric may in fact be too much. That is until Hanzo Hasashi steps in, wanting vengeance against Havoc for killing him earlier. He severs the head of the madman and drags him down to the Netherrealm. Now, due to this happening, the influence that he had over the blood-coded fighters is now severed, meaning that Kotal is able to regain his senses. And in the aftermath of this battle, a relationship is forged between Outworld and Earthrealm, one that is definitely better after Shinnok's invasion. Unfortunately, however, they are unable to capture Mileena, so this brings us into Reptile's final main game appearance in the series, Mortal Kombat X. Now, a fair bit of time has passed between the comics, and the relationship between Outworld and Earthrealm is still kind of up and down, but it all falls apart once Shinnok's amulet comes into the mix. Learning that the amulet has fallen out of Earthrealm's hand and into that of Mileena's, the relationship between Outworld and Earthrealm meets a breaking point. Even after the two sides team up together in order to take down Mileena, Kotal wishes to keep the amulet in his possession, believing the safest hands are his own, and thus Cassie's team, made up of Jackie, Takeda and Kung Jin, are captured and kept in Outworld's docks. But it's here where they learn of a betrayal. You see, Devourer, Kotal's right hand, is in fact a secret servant of Shinnok, and thus when she was given the mission of taking the amulet to the docks, she would betray her allies and travel to Quan Chi's location, wanting to release Shinnok from his amulet as soon as possible. And it's Reptile, Erron Black and Ermac that learn of this, as they arrive at the docks and investigate the bodies left over by Devourer, ultimately deducing Devourer's charade. But before they're able to tell the Khan, they would be attacked by Cassie's team, with Reptile taking on the likes of Takeda Takahashi. And although Reptile is able to use his invisibility to his advantage, Takeda's telepathy prevents Reptile from landing any blows, and thus he is defeated. So after Cassie's team escapes, the three go to see Kotal and report to him of Devora's betrayal. And it's here where Kotal's patience finally runs out, as he wished to do what was only best for his realm. So Kotal, alongside Reptile, Ermac, Ferritor, and Eren Black, would travel to the outskirts of the Sky Temple in order to hunt Cassie's team, as Kotal believed that by bringing their heads to Shinnok, he may in fact buy more time to build up Outworld's defenses. And during this large ensuing battle, Reptile battles the likes of Jackie and Takeda, spitting up acid in Takeda's eyes. Fortunately for Takeda, however, this isn't fatal, and when Reptile goes toe to toe with a very angered Jackie Briggs, he is swiftly defeated. But the numbers games aren't in the Earthrealm's favour, as they are quickly overwhelmed until Sub-Zero and his Lin Kuei interfere, battling against the Outworlders and push them back to their realm. And of course, by the end of Mortal Kombat X, Cassie is successful in defeating Shinnok, restoring the realm back to its former glory. Now unfortunately, this is the last time we actually see Reptile in the main canon. He sadly is not featured in Mortal Kombat 11, and thus does remain somewhat absent from the main game, as he only really has cameo / currency roles in the crypt, and his slide has been given to the sorcerer Shang Tsung. But outside of this, Reptile was yet to appear in Mortal Kombat 11, and with the state of the universe right now, and the uncertain ending that we do have for Mortal Kombat Aftermath, we do not really know what will happen with the character, but even so, it's always possible for him to return in a future installment. But with this being said, that has been the history of Reptile. I hope you have enjoyed this video and come away learning more. Reptile was a beloved fan favourite within the series, and I can see why. It's a bit of a slow burn in the original timeline, but he does get quite the somewhat payoff in Deception, as he does become the host for Onaga. It's a slow burn, but one that definitely seemed quite worth it, but inadvertently bringing in a rather iconic villain in the series. So with this being said, would you like to see Reptile return in the future, or would you like to see his other Saurian counterpart, Chameleon, actually make the roster for the first time in over a decade, as she herself hasn't been playable since Armageddon? Please do comment down below. Of course, we do have the other Chameleon, but they've never really confirmed whether or not he's a Saurian, even though it's pretty much strongly insinuated that he is. But anyway, that's everything I did wish to say here. Now, what are your thoughts on Reptile? Do you enjoy his tragic backstory? Did you like his build up into being the host for the Dragon King Onaga? Please do comment down below. I do apologize for this video coming out a tad bit later than what I had expected, but this video is actually a lot longer than I could have anticipated. Anyway guys, before this video wraps up, if possible, let's try getting it to about 500 likes, as it is an incredible way of supporting this channel. And also don't forget to tick that bell, as it will keep you up to date with all the content coming out for the future. Now, as always guys, please comment, like, subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know. Please take care, and I'll see you all next time.